What have you seen lately, Jason?
I've seen one movie.
Okay.
I came again with something.
Yeah.
I will admit that I crammed it in last night.
Yeah.
It's a movie that's been on my Netflix Instant Watch queue for a long time. It's a movie that stars Brad Pitt and Juliette Lewis. It's actually a TV movie. It still qualifies. It's a movie called, I wrote it down, Too Young to Die.
Okay.
Question mark.
Oh, does the title actually have a question mark?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So it's a question
Okay.
as a title.
Interesting.
Maybe we could do an episode on questions as titles.
That's interesting. I can't think of another one, to be quite honest.
I can come up with a few, but
All right.
It's from 1990. It's obviously early on in Pitt's career before he kind of took off a couple years later. Obviously, everyone says, his first film role was Thelma and Louise, which isn't actually the case.
Yeah.
But anyways, I mean, that's the one that kind of helped him break out a little bit. It is a TV movie, so it's got a few issues there. To start, I feel like it's based on a real story from the 80s, based on a girl who is on trial, and I say girl, and I mean that. She was 16, the real life individual was 16, had married at 13 or 14 and was divorced by a year later, maybe like 6 months later. It didn't take very long. And found herself basically homeless after a while. Her mom abandoned her, and her stepfather, I think it was her stepfather, molested her. So, she's, in a lot of trouble in that case, and comes across this other gentleman who Pitt actually plays in this movie, who basically is a hustler. And I think that's kind of where the edges start bleeding together, whether or not that was true or not. But basically, Pitt plays a guy who finds young women that can strip, or he drugs them and manipulates them to the point where, like, oh, I'm your friend, you can stay with me, which when he says stay with me, he means you can stay in the back of my car with me, because he's just as poor as they are.
Yeah. And
basically manipulates them to the point where he can just profit off of them. And Pitt is really good in this, surprisingly good in this. They would actually reunite 3 years later in a movie called California with a K, and where they play killers. Almost the same thing where they end up in this movie, which is kind of interesting. So they have that chemistry already. And again, Pitt he has this accent, which immediately makes you not think that it's Brad Pitt. I was trying to think of another movie that he's done that is like that, where he just kind of manipulates his voice to where it doesn't sound like him. He's just dirty, just this dirty young Brad Pitt, but he pulls it off. And so it makes me wonder, if I were to go back in time and watch this in the 90s, would I think highly of it, because I wouldn't know who Brad Pitt was, Obviously, if I went back in time, I guess I would still know who he was. But if I had a time machine and I somehow manipulated myself, past self, into watching that movie, I don't know. I think I would still enjoy his performance, but I don't know if I would be as enamored by it, because it's Brad Pitt at his, young start. Again, I looked it up this morning just to kind of get details on it, and I thought, okay, well, yeah. It did seem very TV movie-like, but it had a lot of potential, and it just kind of dropped the ball. I still liked it just because of the performances. It was really nice to see both actors, in their young ways, I guess. And then especially after seeing California, it was nice to see them sort of like, oh, okay, it makes sense that they played almost the same type of people before. It was like a beta test, I guess.
Interesting.
But I liked it. Too Young to Die. It's just one of those things you see, like, like, you might want to watch this, and it's just like, it's got Brad Pitt in it. It can't be that bad. And it wasn't. I mean, it was decent. So if you've got I think it was about 90 minutes long, check it out.
Cool.
Not bad.
I have seen a few things, and the first thing was what I saw at the cinema this week, which was Children of Paradise. And, I had never heard of this movie before a few weeks ago when John was talking about it as coming up on the cinema schedule. And it really blew me away. I don't know if I've ever seen a movie exactly like this one. It was very literary in scope. There was a lot of characters. They were all very well fleshed out. You saw things happen to them over the course of a very long period of time. There was actually the intermission is like a break of like 5 to 10 years, something like that. And that's what's really cool about it. The story is just insanely complex. Like any one of these characters could have just been their own movie.
Yeah.
Like you could have picked out like one or two characters and like just what story did they have throughout this movie, and that would have been one movie, and it would have been great. But they just had the guts to be like, let's just throw them all in there and let's just make this big and let's just follow all of them. It's about a group of actors in late 1800s Paris, and one of them is a mime, and that was a big thing back in the day. You would do whole stage plays based around being a mime. And he's sort of an undiscovered talent a little bit. His father's a mime, and he's sort of trying to break in, but his father doesn't think he's any good, so he can't really break in. And there's a woman who sort of starts out as like, basically early strip shows. Basically, there's like a tent, and like she's sort of sitting in a barrel full of water, so you can sort of see in the water, but you can't really see much. But she's naked, and
I think they mentioned something about she's wearing a suit under there, so it's like a fake peep show or something.
Yeah,
about
something.
That one too. Yeah.
And then there's another guy who's trying to break into acting, and he wants to be like a Shakespearean sort of actor, a stage actor. But he breaks in as a mime because they're just desperate for someone to do it, and so he. But basically, these three people all become friends, and so just out of desperation, the guy who runs the theater, the theater for pantomime, he sort of lets the guy who's sort of a trained mime create his own show because he's just desperate. He doesn't have anything else to put on, and it turns out to be like this huge hit show. And the guy's like insanely talented, and he sort of brings along these other people with him. And there's another character who's sort of like a nefarious type who's sort of friends with the woman, and he's a little bit of a secondary character, but he's sort of always present in the film, and he's sort of driving events in a lot of ways. But I was just blown away by this movie. It looked beautiful. It looked absolutely amazing. It was shot in like the 40s, and it was amazing. It just looked great. There's a lot of really cool effects in the film. There's this one shot, and it's in the trailer, where he's the guy who plays a mime is sort of miming, walking. The background's moving behind him, and he's just sort of like shuffling his feet. But the way he's doing it and the way the shot is set up, it really kind of looks like he's walking along here. And then, the mime falls in love with the woman. The other guy falls in love with the woman. The nefarious guy falls in love with the woman. And they all kind of want her. And the only thing that I think wasn't great about the movie, I really felt like all of the characters were sort of building towards this like shared ending. Like they were all going to come together at the end. And they do that to a point, but then the actual ending, they all kind of break apart, and they all kind of have their own separate ending, which is an interesting choice. It wasn't what I expected to happen, but I don't think it was necessarily bad or wrong. It wasn't what I was expecting to have happened. So
I loved the ending. That was the best part about it. There was no finality to it, hardly. And the last scene was great.
Yeah.
With all the people in the street that are all dressed like him, and this is the one time that he's not dressed like a mime. Yeah. And that was kind of spectacular.
Yeah, he becomes this sort of like, almost like everyone's favorite character in this show he's doing. He has this sort of, spectacular character that everyone wants to, and there's this parade going on outside, and everyone's dressed like their favorite character, which is him. And so he's surrounded by this character that he's created, and it's keeping him from getting the thing he wants. And yeah, it is, as each individual character's ending is very well done. Although the one character didn't really have an ending. He was
my favorite character, and you never saw what happened to him.
Yeah, it was like a setup that something was supposed to happen. The nefarious character kind of stole his ending.
Yeah, he was supposed to have a duel, and I was like waiting to see it.
Yeah,
never happened.
We never got to see the duel. So, but it sounds like you saw it too, Sarah. Yeah. So what did you? It sounds like you liked it. So
I did. I loved it. And the ending was amazing. Drop curtain at the perfect time.
Yeah.
Right there. And I don't think you could have ended it any better, actually. There was no possible way that anybody could be happy. Like, not everyone could be happy. That's just not going to happen. So instead of leaving it completely ambiguous, where you had no idea. He's going after what he wants at some point,
Yeah.
to some point, but that's what I liked about it. I thought it's one of those endings that you really wait for.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a 3-hour movie that I didn't have a second that I thought, when is this scene going to end?
Exactly.
It was perfect. It was like Seven Samurai. I don't have a moment that seemed long.
Exactly. And that's what I was sitting there thinking, like, when the intermission happened, I was really like, that was like an hour, right? It's like, no, it was more than 90 minutes. And then the second half of it was like, just flew by. It was just so well paced and just made you feel like this is a perfectly paced movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do in a 3-hour length.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. I also saw a few other things. I won't talk about all of them in depth, but last week we talked about Noir with Will Scheibel.
Yeah.
And all these movies that I always have thought, like, I should watch that. He just mentioned all of them, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go watch some of these. So I found 3 of these noir films that he talked about, some of them more intently than others, but I watched Chinatown finally.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen Chinatown. I like that one a lot. I do think that if I had seen it before I saw LA Confidential, I would have liked it more. I feel like LA Confidential did sort of the 1940s LA gritty sort of thing a little bit more engagingly than Chinatown. But it's still a really great movie. Oh, yeah. It's a really great movie, and I really liked it a lot. I just felt like it sort of suffered after I'd seen LA Confidential. Like recently, I saw it a few months ago.
Sure.
So, and also there was that video game, LA Noire, that I really liked a lot, that also was kind of doing the same sort of thing.
I always found Chinatown hard to approach.
Yeah.
It's kind of a difficult movie.
Yeah.
It's stubborn. I think that's a proper way of describing it. It's just a stubborn movie that it's not inviting really initially, but then if you stick with it, it starts sort of unraveling and taking the layers off that onion. But it's a pretty stubborn movie up front.
I also might have liked it better if Netflix would have played it all the way through in one sitting, but it would not. It got about an hour in, and then it just would not. Like, it would go like 10 seconds at a time and then just cut off in 10 seconds and cut off. And I was like, okay, I can't. I'm done. I'll watch it tomorrow. Yeah. But I did finish it. I also watched Laura, which it was surprising and interesting to see Vincent Price in a role where he's not like the creepy arch villains type. I mean, he's still a little villainous, but and he didn't have like his standard Vincent Price voice. He had like a southern accent almost.
Really?
It was really kind of cool. But just imagine like Colonel Sanders mixed with Vincent Price, and that's about what it was. It was kind of interesting. I liked seeing the twists were really good. You start out the story as like, oh, this girl was murdered, and we have to find the killer, and there's all these people, and then it turns into like a completely different thing about halfway through, and that was really impressive. So I liked that one a lot. I also watched The Naked City. Okay. Which parts of it I loved, parts of it I hated. What's the deal with the voiceover in that movie?
Yeah, that's true.
There's this voiceover in this movie. It's like having the world's most annoying movie patron sitting directly behind you, like narrating the movie in the most ridiculous way possible.
I never thought about that, but yeah, you're right.
But it's like this guy, and he's like, he's not narrating in like a standard style. He's narrating like he's talking to the characters, like he's telling the characters what they're supposed to be doing. It's like, look out behind you, Fred. That guy's coming up.
It's like a PSA almost.
Yeah.
Like an old film PSA.
It was this close to ruining the movie for me. It really got very close to ruining the movie for me. What saved it was the fact the mystery was really interesting, and the guy who plays the main detective in that movie was great. I don't know his name, but I don't think I've ever seen him in anything else. Yeah. But he was really, really good as like sort of the older detective who knew all the ropes, and he was really, really good, and I liked him a lot. But otherwise, I was kind of blah about the voiceover. That fell flat for me.
Well, you and voiceovers,
I'm not a big fan of voiceovers.
A voiceover narration just really has to blow you away, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, and I mean, the other thing is, I had flashes of The Killing, where there's the voiceover in The Killing that is superfluous for the most part. But that one in particular, the one in Naked City, is just, it's bad. Yeah. It's poorly done. I don't know.
It's built in too. I mean, unlike the Killing or whatever, where it's
I just don't know what it is. What
been manipulated.
What series of decisions led to them deciding, well, this would be great in our noir movie? So, yeah, I don't know. Anyways, so Sarah, have you seen anything else you want to talk about?
I saw The Children of Paradise. Like I said, I've been moving, so basically I'm putting on repeats. Yeah. But the terrible thing is I always pick something great, like the Darjeeling Limited I put on, but it's so gorgeous I end up not moving a thing. And then I tried True Romance because I've seen it a million times, but there's just parts that you find yourself stopping.
Yeah.
I can't ignore the scene with Christopher Walken. I'm not walking away from that. So yeah, I haven't seen much other than those.
All right. A Place for Film is recorded at WFIU Studios in Bloomington, Indiana.